Hi friends, I'm Day, your host, travel lover, deal finder, and storyteller. And this is Wander Every Day, the podcast where real talk meets real trips. Each week, I sit down with some of my favorite well-traveled friends to swap stories. We're diving in on where to stay, what to eat, how to spend your time and money, and how to enjoy exploring the world. Now, let's wander. Hey friends! Welcome back to Wander Every Day. If you tuned in last week, you heard all about Nick and Lindsay's dreamy honeymoon to Athens, Santorini, Naxos, and Paros. And if you didn't, pause, go back, and listen to last week's episode. They shared so much great information and so many great tips for anyone who's looking to book a trip, and I really think that the information they provide packages really well with what we're going to discuss today. Because this week, I'm taking to the mic solo to keep the Greek vibes going with a deeper dive into two alternative options if you're someone who's looking to book a trip to Greece. Two areas of Greece that didn't nearly get enough love last episode are Mainland hidden gems, specifically Nafplio, the first capital of Greece. It's a ridiculously charming seaside town that feels like a postcard, and the Apollo Coast, where I stayed at one of the most beautiful beach resorts in all of Greece, and it's only 30 minutes outside of Athens. The second thing, and perhaps the most common vacation that I hear about when people talk about going to Greece, is a Greek islands cruise. We went on a 7-night Greek islands cruise on the Norwegian Jade to Corfu, Kefalonia, Rhodes, Santorini, and Mykonos. I'll break down what I loved, what surprised us, what I'd skip, and whether a cruise is actually a good way to visit and explore Greece. So if you're dreaming of planning a trip to Greece, or just dreaming of olive trees, turquoise water, and the world's best feta, this one's for you. Let's get into it. So with this episode, we're going to start by talking about the mainland. Because while the islands get all of the hype, and for good reason, I truly think parts of mainland Greece are some of the most underrated travel locations in Europe. And the first destination we're going to talk about is Nafplio. Nafplio is an insanely charming coastal town just 2 hours outside of Athens. And it honestly felt like walking through a watercolor painting. Picture this: pastel buildings, bright pink flower-draped balconies, gelato by the sea, and barely any tourists. It's slow-paced, romantic, and outrageously photogenic. I'll share what we did, where we stayed, and a few activities I highly recommend if you choose Nafplio as a destination for your next Greece trip. Just as Nick and Lindsay discussed in the last episode, Nick and I also traveled to Greece in September. It is, in my opinion, one of the best, if not the best, times to go to Greece because it's not as busy, it's not as expensive, it still has nice weather, everything is still open, but there's still enough going on that the activities you choose to do don't feel deserted, especially when you're going to some of these less touristy spaces. Many beach clubs do close by the end of September, so if you're looking to do a beach club vacation, September is absolutely the month that I recommend going to Greece. Nick and I flew directly from Toronto to Athens, which is about a 9.5-hour flight. It can be long. And like many other flights to Europe, our flight left at night and landed at Athens about midday. I'll tell you right away, one of the biggest mistakes that we made on our trip is that we chose to rent a car and drive from the Athens airport to Nafplio right after landing in Athens. Why was this such a big mistake? Well, with me trying to make our trip hyper efficient, I wanted to just get there right away. But unfortunately, when you don't sleep on a flight overnight and you get in this nice, comfy car, you're going along the hills, Nick and I were both punching each other to literally stay awake. So although for optimizing time purposes, it might seem like a good idea to drive to some of these distant places by car right away, I do recommend that if you're someone that does not sleep well on an airplane, that you perhaps choose to stay in Athens or whatever place you're flying into first, because the last thing you want to be doing is falling asleep while you're driving after not sleeping overnight, let alone discussing the jet lag. When you get there, you're so tired from the jet lag, it almost adds this extra layer of fatigue because you're in a completely different time zone. Greece is 7 hours ahead of Canada and Toronto, so it can lead to being super exhausted your first day of your trip. But after driving down the streets and literally punching each other for 2 hours to stay awake, we finally did arrive in Nafplio, and I am so happy that we did because this place was amazing. Nafplio is one of those places that feels like a secret, even though it was once the capital of Greece. In fact, it was the first capital of Greece. Tucked along the Peloponnesian coast, it has this romantic charm, but also these Venetian vibes. The whole town wraps around this harbor that's lined by restaurants that overlook yachts and the beautiful sunsets. Think of it as the ideal place to eat seafood and drink spritzes near the water. There's also a walkable path that runs along the entire outside edge of the city, so you can take a good 45-minute hour walk and just walk around the coast. We did this in the morning with our coffees, or we would do it after we had our drinks in the evening, just to catch the beautiful views of the Peloponnesian mountains in the background. For history buffs, there is the Palamidi fortress, which towers above the town. You can climb its famous 999 steps if you want a nice hike and also an incredible view. But if you listened to last episode, you might remember me talking about how I did this after I drank an entire Greek coffee. And for those who missed it, a Greek coffee is when they leave the grounds in the coffee. And I thought you had to drink the coffee and the grounds. So needless to say, after I climbed the Palamidi fortress, I also felt like I was going to throw up. So next tip, don't drink the coffee grounds in the Greek coffee. That's not the way it's supposed to be drank in the first place. Needless to say, I wasn't feeling great when we got to the top, but we still walked around the fortress for an hour, just reading some of the history of Nafplio and taking in the views, because you can see 360 degrees around Nafplio and it is absolutely breathtaking. Nafplio in general is low-key and not overly touristy. There are still people around, which is why I like it. It's not dead, it's not quiet. There are still people mingling, eating, drinking, but it isn't overly packed like other big name destinations like Santorini and Mykonos. I would definitely identify it as a place that has slow travel energy and would highly recommend it to anyone who's looking to stay on the mainland of Greece. We stayed at the Ledo Nuevo Boutique Hotel, which was maybe a 10-minute walk from that main walkable harbor. I would recommend this hotel to anyone. We paid $100 a night and had a view of the bay that the harbor sits in, and it was beautiful. It's a small hotel, it's very quaint, super clean, very private. We felt super safe, and I literally was looking at prices for this September today, and prices start at like $110 a night. Canadian to stay at this nice boutique hotel. I just don't know many places where you can get this type of charm, beautiful, quaint, authentic experience for that type of price tag. While we are in Nafplio, we also visited the most famous wine region in Greece called Nemea. Nemea is Greece's premier wine region, and if you're a wine lover, I do highly recommend taking the drive about 45 minutes north of Nafplio to get this experience. Nemea is known by some as the Bordeaux of Greece. Although the wines aren't necessarily Bordeaux's, it still feels super relaxed and generally under the radar. The star grape here is Agiorgitiko, spelled Agiorgitiko, Agiorgitiko. And it's a deep, silky red variety that's been grown in this region for thousands of years. You'll find anything from bold, age-worthy wines to light, fruity table wines, all grown in these rolling vineyards in between the mountains. What makes Nemea special isn't just the wine, it's also the family-run wineries, which are literally located everywhere in this region. The hospitality and the ability to sip wine while overlooking the olive groves and some of the Corinthian ancient ruins is quite special about the Nemea wine region. Many wineries offer tastings and tours, which is very similar to other wine regions in the world. But unlike other regions in the world, these wineries are very small, so you're likely to meet the winemakers yourself when you're there. While we drove around the region ourselves looking for wineries to go because we didn't have anything pre-planned, we found a winery called Karamistos Family Winery, and it was one of our favorite experiences of our trip. We parked and walked up to the building, and when we got to the top, we saw this family outside in the vineyard having lunch, and we knew right away that this was the family that owned the winery just having a family meal. So we actually almost wanted to walk away because we didn't want to disrupt them, but the second they saw us, they were so kind and they were like, come in, and made a table for us. They brought us out wine and cheese and a tasting menu. They didn't speak great English, so they did have to, use like more simple words to explain the wines, but they did a great job at explaining what kind of wines they had and the tasting notes. And we enjoyed essentially a private tasting in this vineyard in one of the most authentic ways. One of our best stories from Greece actually comes from the next vineyard we visited called Ktima Perivu. Nick and I, we think, are in this very remote region. The road less traveled, not a lot of tourists. We didn't see many people on the road when we were driving in this wine region. And we pull up to this winery that is in the middle of nowhere. My husband is half Italian, half Quebecois from Montreal. So we have this running joke that everywhere we travel, Quebec people follow. And of all the places that the Quebec people followed, we pull up to this winery, and is there not a CAA Quebec bus filled with 30 Quebecers that pull up to the winery right beside us? So here we are in the most isolated area in Greece, and the most tourists we'd seen the whole trip end up being Quebecers at the same winery as us at the exact same time. We laughed and listened as many of the Quebecers chit-chatted about the wine and the experience, but we loved the day in general. It was so beautiful outside. We loved being outside in the wineries. At our second winery, we did an actual tour of the vineyards, and they explained their winemaking process. If you want a unique, low-cost experience that mixes hospitality, history, and wine, I think the Nemea wine region is a great option for anyone who is traveling to Greece. In Nafplio, we enjoyed fresh fish at Aeolus Taverna, and we also enjoyed fresh tzatziki and souvlaki at the corner of Cavaleris restaurant. And of course, the infamous 16 ounces of ouzo that I had at Mavros Gatos, which means black cat in Greek. This is a music bar, cafe type vibe, which honestly as a bar itself was a definite highlight of Nafplio. I recommend anyone to go there. On a Thursday night, it had like such a nice vibe, and people were out on the street having drinks, little snacks after dinner. As a place to drink ouzo, they serve you glasses like this big, and I just highly recommend that maybe you eat first and drink water for sure after. A 2-night trip to Nafplio is something I definitely recommend to anyone that wants to go to Greece, looking for a more authentic, slow-paced, affordable experience, which seems to be what I hear all the time when people talk about where they want to travel. We love the vibes, and I would definitely describe Nafplio as a hidden gem less traveled. We then drove from Nafplio back in the direction of Athens to perhaps an even more hidden gem than Nafplio. The Apollo Coast, also known as the Athenian Riviera, is where laid-back energy meets cosmopolitan vibes. All of this is just about 30 to 45 minutes from central Athens and the Athens airport. Stretching along the Saronic Gulf, this Athenian coast is lined with luxury resorts, seaside tavernas, and crystal clear beaches, giving major island energy almost without actually having to leave the mainland. It's perfect if you want to unwind after a busy Athens itinerary, or perhaps my preference after telling you the biggest mistake we made, which was flying into Greece and driving 2 hours. I would actually recommend it to anyone flying into Greece who needs to use these day or two as a way to unwind from their flight and their jet lag. The Apollo Coast is ideal for people looking for an elevated resort vibe, although the prices don't necessarily reflect the fact that it feels as elevated as it does. I actually stumbled upon the Apollo Coast after talking to someone who had stayed in a Greco hotel in Sunio not long before we went on our trip. As a pilot, they said that many of the staff from their airline actually would go to this hotel when they were in Athens for 2 or 3 days during their work trips. It's an area I had never heard of, so to me all this was new, and there wasn't a whole lot of information when I was researching it, but they had such a fantastic experience and recommended it to me so highly that I really put in the due diligence to go to Google and find the best resorts for our budget. We stayed at the Vincci EverEden Resort in Anivassos, and to say this resort was nice is a complete understatement. It was so much more incredible than we could have imagined. It was clean, it was modern, there was an infinity pool that overlooked the Mediterranean. They had a private beach that felt like a private beach club with a beautiful bar and a restaurant, those big beds you can lie out by the ocean. It was the most beautiful resort I've ever been to. There's also a full-service spa, a fitness center, and multiple restaurants. Now, like many resorts in Greece, this was not an all all-inclusive resort. You do have the option for just breakfast. You can pay for half board, but you do have to pay for a meal if you don't skip lunch. When we went 2 Septembers ago, we paid $200 a night for this hotel, which was crazy. $200 a night. And we decided only to get breakfast, so we did pay for lunch and dinner a la carte. Drinks are also not included, so you do have to pay for those, but it isn't outrageous pricing. I looked at this resort for this September, and you can get a hotel room for $275 a night, including breakfast for two, or for $325 a night, and that includes 2 meals, so breakfast and lunch or dinner. That's $150 per night per person for a beautiful resort, beautiful view, infinity pool, beach club, breakfast, and lunch or dinner. The resort felt luxurious, but it didn't come at a luxurious price. We actually drove to the resort with the intention of maybe peeking out during the day or going for lunch at different places, but we loved it so much we did not leave, and we did not want to leave when we actually did leave 2 days later. As I mentioned, if we do this trip again, I would prefer to stay at the very beginning of the trip to work off the jet lag and get some R&R as opposed to right before going to Athens. But I think it's something anyone should consider if you want downtime during your Greece trip and you don't have the ability or time to go to the islands. After Anivassos, we did go to Athens, and we reviewed Athens in the last episode, so I'm going to keep this super brief. We did stay at the new hotel in the Plaka, which was maybe 200 meters from Syntagma Square. Nick and I like to take the train. We don't often pay for taxis, so it was very convenient taking the train from the airport where we had to drop our car back off at the end of our beach resort trip. The new hotel was super eclectic, super clean. It was very nice. We did book it on points. I don't think I would have paid to stay there if we hadn't booked on points, but it was very nice for what it was. I would say there are floor-to-ceiling glass windows, which sound really nice, but there were people right across the street in another tower who were looking right into your room. So we did have to have the curtains closed most of the day. I don't know, it felt like it kind of defeated the purpose of the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, but the location was amazing. We were a 10-minute walk from the Acropolis. As I mentioned, we were right on the Plaka. I do highly recommend if you're in Athens, right across the street from the new hotel is the National Gardens, and it is free to enter. It is a beautiful walk. Just go for a walk through the National Gardens. You can walk to the Plaka from there or add it on to the end of a Plaka walk. There's shade if you need some relief from the sun. There are also some Greek ruins in the area, so you can stop by and see some of that. A few quick highlights or places I do want to give a shout out to. Taki's Bakery and Droop's Pizzeria are right across the street from each other. We went there after our Acropolis tour for baked goods and coffee. Honestly, it is a super busy bakery. You can tell it's local people who go there. They have all the fresh morning pastries, deep fried, that you'd love to have when you're in Greece. Highly recommend getting one of those, and then go across the street to Droop's Pizzeria and get a coffee. They also have cocktails, lunch stuff if you want to be there later in the day. Those two are I would hit up if I went to Greece or Athens again for sure. We also went to Loukoumades, which is highly recommended. Loukoumades is the dessert that's deep fried, almost like a Timbit, and it's topped with whatever you'd like. I prefer honey and cinnamon. Some people like chocolate. The Loukoumades in Athens, it's a bit more modern, but it is fantastic. If you're going at night, there's going to be a line. I had one of my favorite meals in Greece at the Varivakios market. We were in the seafood area of the market, and I got this seafood pasta that was like to die for. I'm a big market girl in general, so if you're someone who likes to see what the locals do and fresh food, I do highly recommend eating in markets. But I did really like my experience at the market in Athens. Near the new hotel was Kostas Silvaki. We did not stop for a gyro there. The line was just too long. So we walked maybe 5 minutes up the road to a place called Acropolis and had a gyro there, and it was very good. I think it was literally €5. The traditional Greek gyro actually has fries inside of it. So it's like this big gyro stuffed with meat, and these fresh tomatoes and fries. You have to get a euro if you're in Athens. You have to get a euro if you're in Greece in general. So highly recommend Acropolis for a euro if Kostas is too busy. We also went to the 360 cocktail bar. It is an incredible view of the city. Just beware of the service if you listen to Nick and Lindsay's podcast last week. And we went to the Clumsies as well, which is rated one of the 50 best bars in the world. We had a cocktail flight there. We really enjoyed it. If you're into cocktails, I do think it's something that you could enjoy doing. We also went to the Seven Jokers bar in Athens, which was a really kind of small, cool vibe bar, if that's something that you would like to do as well. Really, Athens just has a great vibe. People are out, there's lots to do, the food is fantastic, the Acropolis is beautiful. I highly recommend going to Athens on your next trip to Greece. We also went to the Acropolis. We did a self-guided Rick Steves audio tour, which is free on his app. We actually really enjoyed that option versus a paid tour. The reason why is, one, Nick and I could listen to the tour at the same time with our AirPods. Two, we could rewind if we missed something and didn't hear correctly. I find sometimes on tours, depending on how well the person speaks English or how loud it is, you can't always catch what they're saying. So if you're doing an audio tour, especially a free one with like the one with Rick Steves, you can rewind and re-listen. Or if you just didn't get all the information you wanted to, you could just keep going back. It is self-guided, so it will tell you where to walk along the Acropolis grounds for each audio segment. But we found it very informative, and it is a cheaper way to enjoy the Acropolis and the Parthenon. I will say something we did not mention last week is there is no water at the top, and there is also no shade. So please wear sunscreen, bring an umbrella, bring your water. Please be mindful. It is very steep. It is very rocky. If you have challenges specifically with mobility, they try their best to preserve the actual land, but because of that, it is not the most accessible place to visit. So please be mindful of that before you go to the Acropolis, and be aware that you might not be able to visit as much of it as you'd like to. All right, now that we've discussed the mainland, it's time to talk about the most ambitious, but perhaps also the most efficient way to visit the Greek islands, a Greek islands cruise. We boarded the Norwegian Jade and visited Rhodes, Corfu, Kefalonia, Mykonos, and Santorini, all in 1 week. We also visited Ephesus in Turkey, which was an incredible monument. I highly recommend to anyone who has it on their itinerary. It is the most well-preserved ancient civilization I've ever been to. I know, it sounds like a whirlwind, and it was, but it was also perfect in so many ways. In this part, I'm going to break down what cruising the islands is really like, which ports felt magical and which ports felt a little chaotic, what we loved about our cruise experience, specifically in Europe and in the Greek islands, and tips if you're thinking about doing a Greek islands cruise, including the pros and cons of the island cruise style. If you're curious about hearing whether a cruise is the right style for you, or if you're just curious about hearing how we hit 5 Greek islands without burning out, you're going to want to stick around for this. Before I talk about the stops on our Greek islands cruise, let me actually talk about getting to the cruise. We got to the cruise via taxi from the new hotel to the port of Piraeus. I did mention earlier that we don't love to take taxis, but for the price of $15 from the Plaka, it was fast, it was efficient, and they were able to take us right to our cruise ship. If you're someone who's ever been on a cruise before, some of these cruise ports are very large. I'm talking 10, 15, 20 different ships, whether it's ferries, cruise ships, or container ships. They fill these ports, and unless you know exactly what area of the port you're going to, it can be a bit complicated, and that's why we chose to take a taxi in this instance. In another episode, I'm going to go more in depth about cruise travel specifically. Nick and I in the last 6 years have been on many cruises, 2 in the Mediterranean and many Caribbean cruises. So I'm not going to go too much into details of that today. We will review just the experience of the Greek islands as a whole. I will say boarding a cruise ship after spending a week on mainland Greece was a little disappointing. And I'll say that that's because you go from this very authentic Greek experience to being on a cruise ship, which typically has the vibe of wherever that cruise ship is from. We were on the Norwegian Jade, and Norwegian has a very Americanized vibe. So it's a lot of American food, a lot of American drinks, a lot of American people. And it does take you away from that traditional Greek experience that we had been experiencing for the week. So the first thing I'm going to say about doing a Greek islands cruise is you have to remember that when you get onto the cruise ship, it's not like the cruise ship is organized or dressed up to be like you're in Greece. It really does feel like an American experience. Now, don't let that scare you away, because a Greek islands cruise is very efficient. It does allow you to see many different islands in a short period of time in a super cost-effective way. Nick and I paid $850 per person for our cruise. $850 per person. So when you think about that in terms of it being your hotel, your transportation, your breakfasts at times, and oftentimes your dinner, that's just over $100 a day per person. It is hard to beat that price. Now, many cruise ships will upsell you in various ways. We did have to purchase drinks. There was some food not included, but overall, I do think if you're someone who's on a budget and you want to see a lot, a cruise of the Greek islands is something you should consider. Oftentimes when you're doing a Greek islands cruise, these islands are close enough together that you do get a full day at the island you're at. So you'll be docking at 6, 7, or 8 in the morning, and sometimes leaving at 4, 5, or even 8, 9, 10 p.m. at night. Going on a cruise allows you to do this because your transportation is overnight while you're sleeping, so you wake up the next day in a new island. When traveling from two islands that are further apart, oftentimes the cruise ship will leave earlier the first day, and the second day will arrive at the further island a little later in the afternoon and keep you there until nighttime. So in terms of time management, it really can't be beat. And depending on the cruise ship, the cost also is hard to beat as well. So our first island was Rhodes. We left Athens at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the next morning we woke up in Rhodes. Rhodes is beautiful. It has such a unique vibe compared to any other island that we went to. It's medieval, it's cobblestone, and the beaches are super fun and busy. What I will say about each of the islands is that they all have their own beach vibe. It's when you step away from the beach that each island has its own identity. Not saying that the beaches don't have their identity. Last week, Lindsay was talking about Kolumbithyris Beach, which had a rocky, almost like moon beach vibe, similar to the beaches in Milos. Now, you will have different beaches in the Greek islands as well. Sandy beaches, pebbly beaches, full rock beaches. So that is something to consider. But on top of that, each unique island has the White House Blue Roof Cyclades vibe, or in Rhodes, you have this medieval vibe. Rhodes is the largest of the Dodecanese Islands in the most eastern part of Greece, very close to Turkey. It's got history, it's got beaches. At the heart of it is Rhodes Old Town, which is one of the most well-preserved medieval fortresses and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Walking through it feels like you've stepped into a castle. Cobblestone alleyways, stone archways, and the Palace of the Grand Master, but wrapped in medieval walls. But head south and you'll find incredible beaches, the resort area of Lindros, and there's also a hilltop Acropolis there too because, well, it's Greece. We found Rhodes had the most culture, and of all the islands is the one that we wanted to go back to. We had a nice lunch at the Meltemi Cafe, which is right on the north end of Rhodes, right along this beautiful strip of beach clubs that I would definitely like to go back to another time. We also stopped at the Paxi Bar in Rhodes Old Town in the more medieval area of Rhodes and just had a drink and watched people walk by. Honestly, it was a dreamy place. I really would like to go back to Rhodes on another trip, and I think that's one of the best parts about going on a cruise. Cruising gives you a little taste of many different places, but really helps inspire where your future travel takes you. I've said this to Nick before. I think in the future when we book cruises like this, especially to destinations in Europe, I almost wish we could take a few days after the cruise where we don't have anything planned. And at the end of the cruise, we plan a trip to go back to our favorite place because you get so excited and you really get to see what places you like and what places you don't. And I think sometimes the places you like will surprise you. Our next stop on our cruise was to Mykonos, and spoiler alert, it was touristy as hell and not a place that I would recommend many people to go to. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes, it has the white buildings and the blue roofs. Yes, you can take great Instagram photos, but my gosh, is it touristy. We were actually in Mykonos on Nick's birthday. It was his 30th birthday, and we had planned for weeks to probably go to a beach club. I just couldn't come to terms with paying $150 to $200 for a chair at a beach club. That does not include the drinks, just the chair. Once we got on our cruise, we decided we weren't going to go to a beach club to try and save money. We just decided to walk around Mykonos town and get a vibe of the island. But there were probably 10,000 people in a town that maybe supports 2,000 people. There is an area in Mykonos called Little Venice, and just outside of Little Venice, there's this strip of restaurants where you can get a drink. Now, there are a million people walking past you. Also, you have to spend €30 on a cocktail if you'd like to sit there. So begrudgingly, we spent the $30 and had a cocktail for the nice view, but I really, in retrospect, do not think it was worth it. And honestly, we were right on the edge of the water and people were walking past us and pushing us like we were going to fall in the water. It was just not an enjoyable experience. I'm sure you can imagine the service wasn't good. It was one of those things we did because we were there, but would not recommend anyone has to do if they were to go themselves. Yes, we took our picture in front of the windmills. We took our picture in front of the white walls with the pink flowers. But after being pushed around by tourists and walking past Salt Bay's restaurant, we decided to go try and get a gyro. There's this place that a lot of people go to get gyros in Mykonos called Sakis, and the line for a gyro was like 1 hour. It was cash only, and it was absolute chaos. I understand people wanting to get gyros when they're in Greece, but we were not going to wait an hour to stand in a million people just like pushing to try and get into the restaurant. So we actually chose to go back to the ship. I think something that's important if you're going to Mykonos on a cruise stop is firstly, check to see how many ships are going to be in port that day. We had 5 cruise ships in port the day that we were in Mykonos. And if most cruise ships have between 3,000 to 4,000 people in this area, you're talking about 15,000 people are going to be getting off just in the old town of Mykonos. Now, aside from us not really leaving the town, we were kind of scared away because the prices even out of the town just seemed so high. We did try to rent a scooter, but it was also like $100 a day. It would have been something we could have done to go around the town and just see if we liked it, but ultimately we just were not vibing with Mykonos. We found it overpriced, over touristy. I can see how some people could really enjoy it and find it fun, but for us as more budget value travelers, we had been to so many places in Greece at this point that were so much more fun, more enjoyable, more authentic. We didn't feel Mykonos was the right fit for us. Our next stop on our cruise was Kefalonia. And Kefalonia is another good story that I am sure everyone will laugh on my behalf. Kefalonia is one of those Greek islands that feels a little bit off the radar, but in the best way. It's the largest of the Ionian Islands, which is in the western part of Greece, and has more of a Venetian feel due to its proximity to Italy. It's got this calm, laid-back energy that we didn't feel at any of the other islands, which really made it seem appealing if you're someone who's looking to relax on your vacation. This island is known particularly for its dramatic landscapes, its turquoise waters, its famous caves, its small towns along the coastal road. One of the most iconic places in Kefalonia is Myrtos Beach. It has these small little white pebbles and this super turquoise blue water. You've also got Melisani Cave, which is very popular midday, as in the cave there's a hole at the roof where the sun shines inside at a specific time and it illuminates the turquoise water that's at the bottom of the cave. For many people, that's a must-do when you go to Kefalonia. The vibe of this island is more nature and calm, so if that's something you're looking for on your trip, I do recommend Kefalonia. Now, when we ported in Kefalonia, I had this vision to rent a car, drive to Myrtos Beach, drive to Melisani Cave, and then have a nice day at the beach with my husband. That is not what happened at all, because Kefalonia is so small and quaint that their port is not set up for tourism that comes with a cruise ship. We got to Kefalonia, we landed in Argostoli, and we had the intention of renting a car.
Oftentimes when we travel, you can rent a car, rent a scooter, rent an ATV just when you get to the port. So that's what I assumed you could do. But in Argostoli, there was no cars for rental, no scooters, no ATVs, nothing. So Nick and I, as well as a group of 5 other people, walked around Argostoli downtown at 9 a.m. looking for a car with absolutely no luck. Unfortunately, after wasting an hour looking for a car, all of the tours for the day that were going to these places had also already left. So we were essentially stranded at the cruise port, which put me in the absolute worst mood. Anyone who knows me knows I am type A, I'm organized, I have a plan, and when my plans backfire like that, especially when I feel like it ruins someone else's day, in this case my husband's, I get very upset. So here I am, having a temper tantrum in the middle of the street, walking around, not knowing what I want to do, and then it happens. A legitimate pigeon shat on my head. We were standing in front of this restaurant where a bunch of people were sitting, and right after this pigeon shat on my head, I swear to God, the whole patio started laughing at me. I ran into the restaurant's bathroom and I washed out my hair and I was bawling my eyes out. I was so upset. My day had been ruined. This bird had pooped on me. I come out of the restaurant, my hair's a mess, and I'm telling Nick, we're going back onto the cruise ship. I hate this island. So after we go back on the cruise ship, I sat by the pool. I'm pretty sure I chugged like 3 drinks and I had a little pity party for myself. And after an hour or 2, I allowed myself to calm down. We decided to go out and get a gyro for lunch. Something I do like about cruise travel, which a lot of people ask me about, is can you get on and off the ship? And the answer is yes. The ship is basically a docked hotel, so you can come on and off as often as you want. You do have to have your cruise card, which is attached to your ID. So you scan your cruise card when you get on, you scan your cruise card when you go off, but you can come and go as you please as long as you arrive back at the ship an hour before it leaves port. So Nick and I go and get a gyro, we go and get a beer, we rock around Argostoli, all is fine, I've calmed down, and I go back onto the ship and play bingo. And whether it's an old wives' tale that's true, or if it's just super lucky, the only time in my life I've ever won bingo was the day I got shit on in Argostoli. So finally, here I am. At least I'm up $200 US. I feel like I've wasted my day, but Nick and I at least have a good story and have learned a valuable travel experience, which is sometimes you do need to do a little bit more research about the areas less traveled and what they have available to you. Kefalonia is perfect if you want nature, if you want a relaxing island. It's peaceful, wildly beautiful, and panoramic. Definitely a honeymoon destination and somewhere you should consider going if you want the road less traveled. Now, our next stop was Corfu, and I'm not gonna lie to you, it wasn't my favorite. Corfu is like Greece with a twist. It feels very Venetian. There's a lot of British people there, but there is a lot of green beauty. Corfu is also an Ionian island, and you can see Albania from Corfu town, which is where the cruise ship ports. It is a beautiful location. Corfu town itself is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. You can wander down narrow alleys through these pastel buildings. They do have Italian-style piazzas. All this while this fortress lines the skyline of Corfu town. This area is much more lush than the Cyclades, the Cyclades being Santorini and Mykonos. It's very green with olive groves, cypress trees, rolling mountainous hills. There are beaches here. They're just a bit more tucked away from the cities. Rhodes, there was beaches embedded into Rhodes town. Corfu, there were not any beaches within close proximity. I didn't love Corfu just because I felt a little busy. It definitely felt like a place that was lived in. Corfu town itself was like bumping, there were people. But after you've been to so many places in Greece, perhaps it's because we stayed mostly in Corfu town, I just didn't find it was my favorite place to be. We did have a fantastic pasta lunch in this piazza, and this cat literally just kept jumping up onto my chair. So I'd just be sitting there eating, and the cat, no word of a lie, just jumped up on my chair. I also did enjoy perhaps my 5th serving of lucamates in a small piazza on one of these cobblestone streets, which is also very nice. But once again, when you go to so many places, you're looking for a specific vibe, and I found Corfu was just a little bit too busy for me. It is a great choice if you want a Greek island experience that's a little more chaotic, but also a little unexpected. I know a lot of British people travel here, so I'm sure there is something charming about Corfu. It's just not something that we found on our trip. Our last stop on our Greek islands cruise was to Santorini. And as discussed last episode, Santorini has the most breathtaking sunset I have ever seen in my life. Luckily, when we went to this cruise stop, we were there from the late morning until nighttime. So we actually got to have dinner in Santorini, and our cruise ship didn't leave until 11 p.m. When we got to Santorini, we took the funicular up from the cruise port and ended up in Fiera, where we rented an ATV and took the ATV straight from Fiera to Ia. It was so hot, but we still decided to walk the streets of Ia, look at the beautiful houses. It must have been a day where there was less tourists. There was only 2 cruise ships in port, so it did not feel busy. We actually felt it was much less touristy than Mykonos, but once again, that could be relative to the amount of cruise ships that were there that day. Santorini is honestly breathtaking. We loved walking around. Even though it was hot, we just grabbed a gelato, walked through the streets. You could take pictures literally forever. We had a nice fish lunch at this beautiful restaurant with the pink flowers overhanging our heads. The restaurant was called Scala in Ia, if anyone's interested in going. It was a really nice lunch where we had fresh fish. We actually had calamari, but it wasn't served in full rings. It was just kind of partially cut up, so it was still all together, and it was so crunchy and tasty and satisfying. But I think our favorite part of that day was just taking the ATV along the back roads of Santorini. We did stop in Amiro Vigli, where Nick and Lindsay stayed, and we got a drink at a bar that just overlooks Scaros Rock, so we must have been right beside where their accommodation was. We then had our sunset dinner in Santorini at a restaurant called Restoni in Fiera. Now, we reserved this restaurant probably 6 weeks in advance and asked specifically for a table that overlooked the sunset. It did not disappoint. If you're staying in Santorini, in Fiera, or if you are on a cruise ship and you want something that's closely accessible to the cruise ship after dinner, Restoni was fantastic. We had a spritz, we had a beautiful view. I had my last moussaka. I loved this night, and this is one of the highlights that I will remember forever. For those looking to rent an ATV in Santorini, I believe the ATV was $60 a day. Now, for both the ATV as well as for the car, we did need an international driver's license, so I do recommend spending the $30 at CAA if you're from Canada or anywhere else you live, picking up an international driver's license so that you can rent a car or vehicle in Greece. I thought the ATV experience was super fun. I loved that we had a sunset dinner that we could overlook the beautiful Greekian sunset one more time, as Santorini was our last night in Greece. And it was right as we were leaving the port of Santorini that I got my Santorini sweater from last episode, and I'm so happy I did. I'm not someone to buy stuff very often. I'm not a clothes shopper by any means, but that Santorini sweater I still wear all the time. Just be mindful, there are many ports in Greece where you do have to tender from the ship. It's almost like a small ferry. If you get seasick easily, these tenders are not gentle. They rock and roll, especially in bad weather. Oftentimes, actually in windy weather or in bad weather, they won't run at all. So don't be surprised if your cruise stop gets skipped because of the ferry. Another recommendation I'm going to give is to book your excursions wisely. If you're someone who's comfortable traveling on your own, just be mindful that the cruise ship will leave without you. It can be definitely cost saving to book excursions on your own or to adventure out on your own like we did with our ATV in Santorini, but you have to budget extra time in your day to make sure that you get back to the cruise port on time. If there's something you want to do that's not accessible from the cruise port, or you're nervous that could take too long, these are the excursions that I recommend booking with the cruise line. Don't be afraid to explore on your own though, where possible. Oftentimes these ships port in some of the main towns, and if you're just looking to walk around, that is something you can easily do on your own. And as previously mentioned, you can come on and off the ship as much as you'd like. Be realistic and understand that cruising the Greek islands gives you a taste of each island, but you can't really get that true experience unless you're sleeping there, spending the evening there, waking up and having a coffee there. So a Greek islands cruise is a good option if you want a little taste, but you cannot deny you will not have the full authentic experience. Now, as someone who likes cruises, I will say my preference is that cruising is a vacation versus used as a vessel for travel. I do prefer a more authentic travel experience where Nick and I are staying in hotels, Airbnbs, or bed and breakfasts where we can stay overnight and really take in our travel destination. I think doing a Greek islands cruise was nice to get a taste of places, but in all honesty, it's not my preferred way to travel, and I probably wouldn't do it again. I think it's something anyone who wants to travel to Greece is considering, especially if you aren't as well traveled, if you're nervous about traveling to new places, if you are in time restrictions or cost restrictions. If it was me, I might travel the way that Nick and Lindsay did and take the ferry to 2 or 3 select islands, perhaps islands less traveled, and enjoy my experience in each place. If there's anything I didn't cover today while discussing the Greek islands cruise, please feel free to DM me. I tried to keep it brief. I tried to talk about each location specifically, but I don't mind answering any questions as we have been on another Mediterranean cruise before. So I do have general thoughts and feelings and a bit of experience. Otherwise, that's part 2 of our Greece travel recap. From hidden towns to days at sea, this trip had a little bit of everything. I'll drop links to everywhere we stayed and drop some personal tips in the show notes. If you love this episode, share it with a friend who's got Greece on their radar, or send me a DM with your favorite Greek spot. And of course, if you haven't already, hit subscribe or follow Wander Every Day on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're also available on YouTube if you want to watch the video pod. More travel recommendations, stories, and info is at wander_every_day on TikTok and Instagram. Until next time, happy wandering.